Bonjour. Sorry, I was supposed to do this in English, so excuse me. I'll start again. Hello, and thank you for being here. Our panel today is about blockchain. I'd just like you to put your hands up if you've heard of blockchain. Yeah, pretty well everyone. Who understands blockchain? Yeah. Okay. So you are in the right place, because we are going to tell you about blockchain. And I have a great lineup of panelists who will explain about blockchain, but also the different applications in the art world. So I'm going to introduce my panelists. You have actually in your bags, in your conference bags, this nice Quotidien de l'Art program of the day, and in that you have fuller CVs of all our panelists. So I'm going to give very brief introductions. So on my immediate left, we have Bernardine Brocker-Wiener. I hope I pronounced that right. Previously of Trinity House, Maddox Street, Traffic Creative Management, and Ralph Appleton Associates. But the important point about Bernardine is that she co-founded the Vastari Group in 2011. And this is a resource that connects collectors with museums or institutions that want to hold shows. To her left, immediately, we have Paul Stab, who leads Artori's Berlin-based product development and technical team. And Artori is a registry, so they register information about artworks on the blockchain. To his left, we have Olivier Marian, who, it goes back in 1998, he co-founded the startup of eMarkis Andromis. Okay, I've pronounced that right. And he's an investor in a lot of companies, in technology companies. And he joined Artea, which is one of the sponsors of this conference, in, what year did you join? 3 years ago, right. So he will talk about, and in fact I think he might have something interesting to share with us a little bit later today. And finally, last but certainly not least, we have Francesco Boni, who is a lawyer by training, but he comes to us from the investment and tech side, and he founded ArtSquare, which is a blockchain platform offering tokenized artworks for sale, and will have a dedicated trading exchange. I think next year is the plan, isn't it? Right. So that's our very good panel. I'm now going to ask each of you to give us a shortish, very brief explanation of where you stand with the blockchain. But so that you can understand blockchain better, we're going to start with Bernardine, who's going to give us a very simple explanation of what exactly is blockchain.
Yeah, a very difficult task. It's very easy to then get complicated into all of the intricacies of the technology of blockchain. But at the end of the day, there are three main things that are important about blockchain technology. The first is it's a distributed ledger technology. What that means is, in essence, you have, before, when you saved a bit of digital information, you didn't know when, where, and how that digital information was saved in the database. What blockchain does is, through cryptography and copies, it makes that data more trustworthy. You know who put that information into the database and at what time. So I think that's the most important thing in terms of the technology. And then there are different ways in which you can apply that. So as I mentioned, it uses copies. This is the distributed ledgers. If you think about that in a real-world example, if you look at Lloyd's of London, every underwriter has a copy of the risk that they are underwriting, and they check that that ledger is the same amongst all of them when they have a claim. It's the same in blockchain technology. You'll have a bit of data, and all of the machines that have a copy of that information can verify that that is correct. So the second term that's important to know with this technology is consensus algorithms. It's what percentage of these machines on the platform agree to that information being correct, and which machines have been decided to be those arbiters. So I think that's a very important thing. You shouldn't say that a public database, a public blockchain where you're using the computers all around the world is different from a private blockchain where you decide on a consortium of computers and a consortium of people who decide that that data should be correct. And then the third thing to know is smart contracts, which in essence is a formula. So because you can know when something happens, so if Georgina verifies that this has happened at this point in time, and all of our computers have a copy of that data, then we can trigger an action. And so that smart contract can be applied to a lot of different places, but basically it means that if one thing happens, then something else can happen. And I think the thing that keeps happening is people focus on the applications of blockchain and the way in which people have decided to use this database, rather than understanding it's just an ingredient. It's one bit of technology that helps you trust digital information that you can then build on.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Right, now, you now all understand blockchain, so that's fine. So we're going to move on to Paul, who's going to explain to us about the registry aspect and Artori.
So basically what we do is writing a collective memory of the art world about all kind of artworks, events, and what you basically know from a catalog raisonné. But it's multi-authored, so people can write on it as soon as we basically give them keys so that they can sign their submissions. So basically, Sotheby's, Christie's, or certain other institutions in the market submit records about certain artworks events, and we store these in a database. And that database is artwork-centric, not lot-based, but artwork-centric, so you have all the events that actually happen in the lifetime of an artwork in nice chronological order. And all of those are signed by the submitter, by the author, and then put together in like a little hash sum or like a fingerprint, and this fingerprint is put on the blockchain. So we use the blockchain basically to verify records that has been submitted to us. So we don't write any data on our blockchain, on our database. So the big difference is on how we use blockchain technology to other institutions or organizations in the market is we're not building a marketplace. We're building infrastructure for people to verify data and connect data that has been submitted to encrypted certificates that the owners of the artwork receive.
And who decides what goes onto the blockchain? How do you have a panel? How does that work?
Well, we decide on like who we actually give the rights to write into the database. We're starting just now in the upcoming weeks with a big auction with Christie's. Then we go on to the TEFA fair. What people write is their own business, but they obviously put their name and their brand on the line because this information will be there forever, will forever be stored, and will be publicly and transparent available.
Fine, lovely. So thank you very much. So we'll now move on to Olivier. Can you tell us how the relationship between blockchain and Arteia?
Yeah, sure. So blockchain is a technology, as you said. It's just a tool that can do many things. One of the main interesting thing for us is that it's able to create a secure database. For instance, if somebody writes data on this database, he uses some kind of digital signature that proves that he created this data in this database. And once it's written, it cannot be modified anymore, and it's protected here. Regarding Arteia, we are creating a ledger of artworks and some kind of a global multi-artist catalog raisonné. As you know, the fact that an artwork is recognized in a catalog raisonné can have a huge impact on the value of this artwork. So if you create a digital catalog raisonné, you have to find a way to make it very safe, very secure. And this is one of the best use cases for the blockchain. Still, when you have such a database, you have 3 challenges. The number of artwork that you can add to this database, the authenticity, of course, of the information that you put regarding each artwork, and also the copyright, the problem of reproducing the image of this artwork on this blockchain. But I'm very happy to say that in about 1 hour we'll be able to announce a great partnership that will help us to solve these problems.
Okay, thank you. So keep tuned, stay tuned. In an hour's time we'll have an announcement from Artea. So here we've seen registry, creating a database. We've had an explanation of how this technology works, this new technology. So my last panelist, Francesco, has a different utilization of blockchain. Can you explain about ArtSquare and fractional ownership, which is not without its detractors in the art world?
Well, fractional ownership in the art sector can be achieved simply by issuing tokens that represent portion of the total value of the artwork itself, and then proposing these tokens to the public, and creating a situation of fractional ownership, multiple ownership. It's exactly like the stock market. I can go to the stock market and buy a piece of Google, piece of Amazon, piece of Facebook, and own a tiny, tiny part of that company. It's possible to replicate this situation in the art sector. At ArtSquare, we are doing this by having a platform that simply allows any art owner to go online, tap on the screen on the phone, and issuing tokens that represent portion of the artworks. It's, as you say, there's a lot of discussions going on in the art sector about this, but I think, and we can discuss it then further in details, it's simply applying a great technology to a sector that has some limits, and unlocking those limits, creating new opportunities.
So there's a lot of questions, obviously, to ask all of you. Perhaps just Francesco, while we're on the subject, where will the artworks that you tokenize come from?
Will come from the real world. From the real world, from auction houses, from galleries.
Who buys them, or how do you get the artworks which will be tokenized onto your platform? Do you purchase them? Do you have an agreement with the vendor?
No, it's something that already exists in the art world, multiple ownership. It's always been done. It's been done by auction houses, it's been done by galleries, it's been done by artists themselves. It's simply crowdfunding, and it's been done with simple verbal agreements or written agreements, or with more articulated legal entities, such as creating a special purpose vehicle, SPV, that owns the artwork.
Right.
We set up a company, we buy an artwork, and then we hold to the shares of the artwork itself, waiting to sell it. Now, this complex situation, well, just by looking at the nature of this relationship, we can see, in my opinion, the limits of the art sector. Limits that match the advantages of the blockchain. We have an issue of trust. We buy an artwork together, you sell it, and you tell me a price that is actually not true. We have a limit of liquidity. We have bought this artwork, it's there. We cannot recover the money at all until we sell it. And we have a limit of cost of transaction. The transaction fees in the art world are incredibly high, up to 50% markup from a gallery or an auction house. I think, in my opinion, coming from an external world, a tech world, a business world, those are, and I see in the art industry that these limits are difficult to stop. It's difficult to find solution. If we match this, if we look at this situation of multiple ownership and we match these limits with the advantages of the blockchain, we have solved all of the problems, because we have.
Can I say?
Yeah. You go with the pros, I say the cons.
I think that I've been talking about this for a long time, since 2015, about the concept, and I think that the concept is something you can fall in love with. And the idea is really lovely, but the reality of fractional ownership of art can sometimes be much more complicated than the idea. And if you look at, there are many authors who are looking at how the commodification of other types of assets, including oil. You had the same type of dialogues in the early 20th century about oil that we have now about art. There's no standardization. There's no there's no liquidity. There's no this barrel of oil is a very different quality from that one. So how could we ever price them all the same way and create a market? And it took the market itself to understand and come forward and decide on a standard together to create a secondaries market of the assets. So I would argue that it's a really nice idea, but unless the market gets behind it, you will run into a lot of problems.
I absolutely agree. In fact, the blockchain technology, you're talking about the art sector embracing the blockchain technology, and I think it's happening. We are here talking about it. Christie's did a summit about in July in London about the blockchain. It's simply, it's exactly like what happened with it in the finance market when we were saying, oh, I don't need computers to place an order. I can do it by just talking with you. And here we are now. You can place an order on of buying a stock from your telephone.
I guess when we put together that conference with Christie's, we chose the title very carefully, which was, is the art world ready for consensus? Which I think that is the part that is a little bit contentious at the moment. There are large entities that have a lot of power, but no central authority really. And
but isn't that the point of blockchain? Is that there
yes,
isn't a central authority?
But so then you
I
would
thought
have
that was
to,
the whole thing.
No, exactly. But you would have to have every single part of the art market come together as a consortium and agree. It's not one company that decides I'm going to do this. It needs to be everybody. And I think that's
the whole point of the technology. That's the whole point of blockchain, to stop centralization. Because what you just said basically proves the point that there's a problem in the sector. Because if the first keynote mentioned, the branding, since there was the branding of Christie's at that auction when the Da Vinci Jesus portrait was sold, then it was so valuable. Is it fair that it's still in the hands of few and not in the hands of the market to decide the value of art?
Right, I'm going to dial you all back because we've gone off down onto that, and I've got some more general things to discuss. I think you wanted to say something, Paul?
Well, I think we face the same problems. We were thinking of, okay, great, tokens sound fantastic, and self-fulfilling contracts, and it's also a great vision. But actually working then with the art world and with the art market, you really need people to all opt in. And that is problematic, especially with tokens, right? Because like you basically create an identity on the blockchain that should be coupled with a real life object and its history, etc. And as soon as somebody does not opt in, you have a broken link. And that's why we decided to rather record single events and offer certificates for those. And maybe later in time when the usability of the technology, like, I mean, who knows how to really use a encrypted wallet, etc., etc. We're using it, WhatsApp, etc. But like, if you really confront a collector with the fact that if you lose their key, basically you lose title, then you get some rolling eyes.
Yeah, people often don't think about that. I often tell this anecdote. I was given a Bitcoin in 2013, 2014 in a digital wallet on my old phone. And I lost that phone, and I did not write down the private key of that Bitcoin. And it's gone.
A whole Bitcoin?
A whole Bitcoin. It's gone. I was given this over drinks. Somebody said, this is going to be really cool, you should have one. And I downloaded the wallet, I did it. Clearly, with drinks and things, you don't think to write down the private key.
Please let me know where you go for drinks.
Yeah, I don't think people are that generous anymore. But I think that exactly, there is no helpline that you call and then say, I lost my key, can you give me my key back? There's nothing. It's gone. It's yours and yours alone. And consumer behavior needs to change in order for that to be usable.
So, actually, all right, I've got another question to ask you. But first of all, I'd like to go right back to the beginning, because we now know what blockchain is. I wrote an article that was called Holy Grail or Hot Air. Okay? So, my question to all of you is this buzz, where does blockchain fall? Is it the really incredible future technology that's going to change all our lives, is it a technology that will simplify our lives in certain cases, or is this current buzz around blockchain a bit exaggerated? Who wants to take that?
I mean, I worked in trend analysis for a while, and what I realized is that if you come back to the same panel after 5 years, you're not talking about the same things anymore very often, or in a different form of it. If I look at blockchain, I would say it's in the same state as the internet was at some point. And everybody was like, well, okay, what is this good for? Right? Okay, you can send emails now. It's a bit faster than mail. But it really changed all our lives. And I think blockchain is at the same point. It is extraordinary technology, and it could do a lot. You see first ideas. But we need time for standards to be set, for people to adopt to the technology, learn how to use it, etc., and also develop ideas on what else it could be good for.
Olivier.
What is very strange is, I was at the start of internet. I was working on a startup, and at that time, you had no meetings like this talking about TCP/IP or any internet protocol, and nobody was talking about how it works. We were just trying to make applications on this. And it's very surprising to have so many people here wanting to have some information about the blockchain. I mean, it's just a tool. You just have to understand what people will do with this. And probably most of the people don't need to understand how it works. It's just a tool.
Yes, go on, Francesco.
I pick up one last point on this. Number one, regarding technology, I wanted to ask, how many of you use emails in the room? Okay. How many of you know what is a post office protocol? It's so there's no need to know what is technology. And regarding the buzz of media around blockchain and Bitcoin, it was actually launched 10 years ago, the Bitcoin white paper. 10 years ago was the year of financial crisis, when Lehman Brothers, I'm not going to go in that topic.
Rest your case.
So there are the reasons behind the values of democratization that the blockchain is basically pursuing are really important and are really they're really close to the public. So this is why there's been a lot of education in tech. There's speculation because everybody. Who doesn't want to have the shares of? Who doesn't want to go back in time and buy shares of Amazon? So this is why people are looking at it. They are curious about it, but they are close to these values of democratization, of stopping the control of the central banks.
That was what the internet was originally too. It was all about democratization.
And thanks to internet, now everybody can access information about this topic and join this or. Before, you need to go and knock on a door and say, hey, you want to know what is internet? Now we can just tweet something, and somebody in Malaysia is probably following us right now. So it's because of internet that is spread out.
Bernardine, you don't use blockchain.
That's a lot of people have said that because we approached Christie's to do the Art and Tech Summit this summer, and we helped put together the program and put together the content. And the reason we did that was because we have been doing proof of concepts with blockchain technology, as I said, since 2015, 2016. And we know that there's huge power in this. But because of the cryptocurrency boom that happened up to December 2017, you suddenly had all these expectations of what the technology would do. And a lot of people saying, well, but are you going to be issuing coins? Are you going to have authenticity issues? People thought an immutable ledger meant that you couldn't overwrite the data that's already there. There was a lot of misinformation. And so the first thing we believe at Vastari is that you need to have the right structure and the right buy-in from the industry before you even start saving things on the blockchain. And so when we saw all of this movement and all of this buzz, we thought it was extremely important for the market to come together and to realize what was going on and to then discuss what the next steps would be. And I'm extremely optimistic. I know I'm being a bit negative on this panel. I'm extremely optimistic what's possible, but I think that it needs to be done in the right way and not misused.
I'd actually... Sorry.
I think you're talking
go
about
ahead.
adoption. And adoption is faster and faster the more we look closer at technology. Television took 50 years to get... I was actually at a panel in London about the automotive industry, and they were showing how in 10 years, Fifth Avenue in New York had horses riding in the street in the 30s, and then 10 years later, only cars, and you cannot spot a horse anymore. And now, if you want, we are looking at the world of cars losing the cars because of sharing economy. Actually, I've been in Paris one day. I've seen these scooters, amazing. I fell in love. So adoption in technology is faster and faster. I agree with you 2,000% that a wallet, a digital key, generate the code, the nodes moving around, all this fluff is confusing and scary. I agree 3,000% with you that the technology is not solid enough to go public. But on the other side, first of all, the higher the risk, the higher the return if we talk about speculation. So if people want to make money, you wanna come in now. Number two, when it comes to tech, risky. It's risky, speculation. Yeah. And number two, when it comes to adoption of tech, you just need the big players, tech players, to come around, to come back the technology. And we know that the big players are backing it. So once you have Facebook, Google, Amazon, or the players in the Silicon Valley, Asia, back in blockchain, you can. I don't think there's any doubt that it will be adopted worldwide.
I wanted actually just to, perhaps Bernardine or somebody to explain that you should not mix up blockchain and cryptocurrencies. I think there's a lot of confusion that these two are somehow completely linked. Perhaps somebody who can explain.
I mean, the cryptocurrency is using blockchain to be able to work, and it's creating a digital currency. And the fact that you can have unique tokens that are not replicable, that are permanent, means that you can transfer ownership of that currency to someone else, and they'll know that it's real. But a lot of applications in blockchain at the moment use those cryptocurrency protocols to build their own thing. I mean, if you look at Ether, if you look at the Bitcoin blockchain, they're using those protocols to build other transactions. So they are linked on a tech sense, but not on an application sense.
Okay, come back to cryptocurrencies a bit later and tokens, but I wanted Paul, perhaps both Paul and Olivier, to talk to me about the issue, which is, as you know, economists say rubbish in, rubbish out, i.e. the quality of something that's recorded, and in this case it's immutable, it's uncorruptible, is going to totally depend on the quality of the information that's put onto the blockchain. Now you have some people like Codex who will put pretty well anything on, I think. In your case you have a sort of panel. Can you give us a little bit the pros and cons of the way that works?
Yes, I mean, everybody who looked into a catalog raisonné also knows that these have very different qualities, for example.
Yeah.
So not necessarily everything that is written in a catalog raisonné is the truth. And the same is with the blockchain. Just because it's immutable and there forever, it doesn't mean it's correct or it's true. So that's why we think we absolutely are dependent on the expertise of the people who actually know about art and the art market to make certain statements. We can't even say, is this correct or not? I mean, we would need a whole building of experts just to make assessments of the data that people actually send us over. That is not possible. I don't believe in that. And that's why I think you need somebody to guarantee that this information is correct, or at least that's what they think. That's what their statement is. And it's the same with the certificate we issue. Like, we need somebody to actually step in and say, this is actually a collector, and this person actually owns that artwork. If anybody just comes along and says, like, oh, I claim this artwork, please offer me stamp a token for this, we would end up in a big mess. And I mean, like, we're working basically with more or less with bridging technologies here. We're not going straight for tokenization. We're going for single certificates, and also we are like writing our data on a centralized database that we connect to the blockchain. Just because we have certain problems, we actually want to launch that product. We're launching it in the beginning of next month, and like with a comprehensive database next year, and just the data that you can throughput, like that doesn't work on a blockchain. If you want to upload images or something like that, that is very expensive and slow. So.
Well, I don't totally agree with your approach, but yeah, first point is, of course, the source of the information is vital. So what is the best source of information about an artwork? It's the artist or the estate or the organization managing the most recognized catalog raisonné for this artist. So this is what we are doing. We are working with those people to be certain to reduce the amount of possible intermediaries that could make a mistake in copying voluntary or involuntarily, not voluntarily, involuntarily, to put this data on the database. But it's typically technical, but we believe we can, and we do. We have a demonstration outside that we can work. We can write a lot of the data in the blockchain. It seems to us that it's important. Of course, the image is not a possibility, so you just do a hash of the image. But anyways, just purely technical. The most important thing is, as you said, and you agree on this, the source of the information
Must be reliable.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But I've heard of some other people trying to do catalog raisonnés on the blockchain, and from what I've seen from others is that they are the authorities behind these catalog raisonnés take years before they're happy to say one thing about the artwork. So if they're going to have to put it into an immutable ledger today, they will hesitate. They will not want to put that information until they're 100% certain. How are you going to deal with that? Sorry, I'm asking a question, but
you will have a great answer in about 1 hour. That's all I can say. I'm sorry.
So we will know.
Well, what we do is basically we let people, like that's why we first started to work with aggregators of data, basically auction houses and dealers who basically can make certain statements. Yes, they sold this piece for this and this price from private collection to private collection. Yes, they can say that with certainty. And they're putting it on their website and their archives as well. So this is an easy approach. Also, you can go with artists, etc., etc. Yes, if you basically have a catalog raisonné and catalog raisonné authors who sometimes also have certain political ideas of like what should go in there and whatnot, then it's a different situation. But we actually made good experience by now, seeing that people actually pick up and are willing to do these statements.
I want to go back to this question of tokenization because, Francesco, next year I think that you are launching a platform where you can actually trade in the tokens. Are you using your own, have you issued your own cryptocurrency?
Not yet.
No, not yet. Are you going to do an ICO that's an initial coin offering in which you issue your own cryptocurrency and get people to buy them? What's the plan?
This was the plan. We are avoiding doing that because of the speculation. No, not because I see you smiling, but it's not because the market is down. It's not because the market is down and there's no way to grab some money and go. It's because our approach is exactly like what you said: is to work with the customers, work with the public, and solve a problem. So before doing that, in order to make sure that the product is right, we are first launching. We are only fundraising privately and with strategic partners that are helping us to make sure that the tech is right. And then we will launch an ICO simply to create a community and give access to the users to discounts on the deals, so there will be early birds that will have advantages on the deals that we offer. So I agree that we need to work on the tech a lot, but working on the tech doesn't mean having 5 people in a room looking at a screen talking with a techie word difficult to understand. It means working with the customers and asking them if they are happy with the product and if it's solving a problem. Then behind the scene, you do the techie stuff.
The reason I was smiling, sorry about that, is because I've also found that the people are not as enthusiastic about doing ICOs because of the regulation that's coming around issuing tokens, because it could be seen as a security and could be regulated by the FCA and other organizations. And rumor has it that those in the US that did ICOs got letters through the post of cease and desist. So I think that the ICO model, as you're describing it, which is more like a crowdfunding platform, is probably going to be the more effective method of doing these things than what was done before.
No, I absolutely agree. Regulators are already regulating. Malta announced 3 days ago the regulation that Gibraltar, there is the FCA looking at it. I think in England they're kind of busy with Brexit nowadays, so they might wait a bit. In general, it's again the public that needs to decide. I apologize. I'm really passionate about the internet giving back to the hands of the customers, of the public, the power, and it's just the meaning of the internet. So if the public decides that if I want to to offer somebody in the room 20% of an artwork that I own is in my house, I don't need to ask Chris's their opinion, sorry, I wanted to be political correct, ask several advice, ask auction houses, go to the lawyer. I want to make an agreement, I want it written, and I want it safe, and I want to everybody to live their lives and then make a return or enjoy something together. So when it comes to tech, it should be the customers to decide if it's right or wrong.
Okay, Bernardine organised an amazing art market day, blockchain day at Christie's earlier this year. And one of the key points that emerged was the fact that blockchain might be incompatible with GDPR. Now, I'm sure that all of you have been receiving a complete tsunami of emails to make sure that you are GDPR compliant. Any company has to. And has this problem been solved? I mean, it's immutable.
Yeah. So I think it depends on how you look at it. You cannot save personal information into the blockchain. Personally identifiable information, PII, which means that you cannot have anything in the blockchain saved that could then be traced back to the person. But how that's defined is still a little bit up in the air, because if you have a hash of the information about the person, that's a standardized, however many digit character cryptographic message, no one will know that that's about me. So that is one way to look at it. But if you have the private key or if you have the access key, you can then read that cryptographic message and know what that is. So that is the way that most people are getting around it. They're saving just the hash and not any actual information.
Personal information. Okay, so I'm sure that you have a ton of questions. I am going to give the audience the chance to ask questions, but before we move on to questions, and this is such a vast subject, we could be here till breakfast tomorrow, but unfortunately we can't, and we have a lot of very other interesting sessions to come. I'd like each of you to give me an idea of how you see blockchain within, I gave a time frame of 5 years. Already tell me whether 5 years is too short, too long. And how do you think it will affect people's lives, and particularly, obviously, the art industry?
Should I start?
Go
Okay.
ahead.
So concerning the art market, I think in 5 years you will have a completely comprehensive database where you find all the artworks and validated, and with vetted data, probably even tokenized. And I think most of us will actually be very firm on using crypto wallets and shifting tokens around and storing cryptographic information. I think this will happen.
Within 5 years?
I actually think it will happen in 5 years. I mean, like, if you look at anybody who's like dealing with cryptocurrencies, there is enough applications that work just hassle-free, and that works fine. Even though if you walk around, even in a tech world, not everybody is doing this. So, but I think 5 years is a good time, and I think it actually will benefit the art market. The art market will be more transparent and faster and more efficient. That's what I think.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the idea also is that, again, it's just a technology. Hopefully, this technology will disappear behind all the applications that will be there. Nobody will think about a wallet or anything, or is it worth to speak about immutability or not? Again, also I agree that it should be very good for the market, because you talked about transparency and liquidity, and this will help new people get onto this market. Today, if you buy a 5,000 artwork, well, if you want to sell it, you're stuck. So if you bring transparency and liquidity, this will allow more people to make the first jump, to buy something, and then get to know this market and be involved in this market. So
a
should be a
question
very
of
good
increasing
thing.
trust. Increasing trust in the market.
Just not thinking anymore about trust. It's just
not even thinking
like a efficient market.
5 years, I think it's gonna happen in a snap of a finger when a big player is gonna launch something native on a telephone. Then when the next iPhone or next Galaxy will have a native wallet, people will start to look, working with it and trusting it, because again it's validated by a big brand. In the art, so adoption of blockchain and wallets and tokens, I believe is going to happen inevitably, maybe earlier than in 5 years' time. When it comes to the art market, in my opinion, I think it will not necessarily disrupt it in a way that will make art accessible to the man of the street, but it will definitely allow a better education for millennials that it will bring it away from the temples of art, and it will bring it back on the fingerprint of millennials that are just used and to learn and using their own tools and to make decisions by themselves. So I see it translating the art sector and bringing it in the hands of the users.
So democratization.
Democratization,
yeah.
if you want.
And Ben?
I also believe in the democratization, but maybe in a bit of a different way. I think that there will be a time when a lot of companies will be doing a land grab for data in the blockchain. So a lot of different players will come about saying, I have the best solution, I have the best solution. And I can see it going two ways. I think the best way, the optimistic way, the way that would be wonderful for the market is that all of these big players work together and agree on inter-protocol activity, agree on sharing information, having certain data in a public ledger that they can reference from each other, and then the tools will become effective. If you have an Artery, an Artea, a Verisart, and a Codex that don't talk to each other, it's not helpful for the market. So I think that's one big thing that needs to happen in the next 5 years. And then on the liquidity side, I'm actually really excited about exhibitions, because that's what I do. And the fact that you could potentially look at the application of ticket revenue share and having a certain type of liquidity for the art market that doesn't exist currently, that you can work with the venues that exhibit the content and the producers of the content to have a new economy there. So that's what I'm trying my best to facilitate in the next 5 years.
Well done, and we wish you well for that. Now I'm going to open up to questions, if you can put your hands up, and could you please wait for the microphone? Have you all understood what blockchain is now? Have you no more questions? There's a question over there.
Yes, good morning. Just a question about sustainability that was raised by Pontus this morning. I'm afraid you know that blockchain is the most consumering and most non-sustainable energy system in the world. And how do you feel about that? Because it's just the worst technology.
Excellent
energy
question.
consuming.
Yes.
It really depends on what blockchain. You're talking about Bitcoin using proof of work. If you look at the future of Ethereum, for example, going on proof of stake, this is really a technical question. Today, the way that the Bitcoin blockchain works, it makes use of a lot of computer intensive process, but this is not the future of every blockchain. So
I think in general, computers need to be more efficient. So hopefully we will start having, instead of heating systems in our home, the compute power from the computers will heat our homes. We will reuse that heating in a different way. Maybe I'm being very optimistic, but I do think that that's the future, that you use the compute power and the energy from that compute power in different ways.
But here again, it's necessary to separate cryptocurrencies and mining for Bitcoin, for example, from the use of the blockchain, because the blockchain itself doesn't need
But
that.
Depends what you're saving.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you need the mining to know what's in the blockchain. You need the mining. It's different. You don't need the cash. You don't need the Bitcoins. But you need the mining to know. If you want to open and read the blockchain, you need to mine. If you want to mine, you need the Bitcoins. If you want the Bitcoins, you need to farm. If you want to farm,
No.
you need
I'm sorry.
a lot.
I'm sorry, but that's not correct.
Sorry, I'm not an expert, but nonetheless, the energy that is consumed is massive.
Again, Bitcoin is one kind of blockchain. For the mining, for the consensus of Bitcoin, you are using something that uses energy a lot because it's the proof of work system. For a lot of other blockchains, you don't need this. For example, we won't use this. So it's really there are hundreds of ways of doing a blockchain database. So it's not really true for every blockchain.
Yeah, but in general, I agree that the way that especially the Bitcoin blockchain comes to consensus and decides what is true or not is not great. But that's what I also meant. I think there's a lot of standards that have to be set, and also that actually work on a scale that we're talking about. When it was originally designed, then that wasn't a problem. It was like a mathematical challenge. And now it's much more like, okay, how do we transfer that into the real world? Like with millions and millions of transactions in no time. So, but yeah, as you said, I think like Ethereum already offers something that is very different from that. Yeah, I think that's the challenges we're facing.
I guess a good correlation would be if you were to save everything on floppy disks, you would get worried that you would have to use so many floppy disks to save the amount of data that we're using now. But better technology evolves so that you can save more information in a more efficient way, that you don't need to save everything on floppy disks.
So you think that blockchain will evolve in a way that will become more efficient with energy?
I would say that blockchain is evolving in a way that right now is evolving. People, I totally agree with this example of the floppy disk. And yes, it's true, it's difficult, it's confusing. But my first, and it used a lot of power. My first computer was this big, and now I have this, and I do much more than what I used to do with my first personal computer. And when it comes to the standard, yes, it's true, we don't have a standard yet, but who is deciding the standard? The public decides the standard.
So it will evolve.
It will evolve, but it will be the adoption that will decide which standard. It will be EOS, NEO, it will be Ethereum. We don't know, but it will be once the public will start to use it that we will know who are the big players.
I think we have time for one more question, Jean-Baptiste. So, are there any more questions? Can you wait for the microphone, please? I can't. Oh, you have it. Good. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. You made a wonderful introduction about blockchain. Thank you very much about that. You had a third point in your presentation. What was the smart contract? I think that smart contracts could have a huge impact on the industry. What do you think about it?
Can I pick on the smart contracts? I'm a lawyer by trade, and the reason why I'm so passionate about the blockchain is because of smart contracts. And the reason why I think tokenization will work is because there is a smart contract in it. When you and I we are deciding to share the ownership of an artwork, we have a smart contract that defines who is entitled to, who is in charge of paying the insurance, who is entitled to get the dividends once we have an income from the artwork, say we rent it to a museum. What happens if the artwork, so everything is decided in advance. And again, lawyer by trade, this is killing the legal market, but it is making things more easy and trust, and it's just faster to make an agreement because we know we won't go into litigation and we won't have much problems. So I thank you for the question. I think smart contracts, I really wish that the public could focus on the functionalities and advantages of smart contracts more than the word Bitcoin and the mining and all this difficult stuff that, trust me, there's nothing to do with the public.
Do you want to, since you mentioned smart
I completely agree with what you said, and I think that if we all in our working lives start thinking about where we have an if this then that formula, and where you're making an agreement with someone that you say, if this artwork arrives safely at this location, then I will pay you this much. If this artwork is damaged, then you will pay me a loss. That is the type of formula that blockchain is really, really efficient for.
That's the most wonderful way to conclude. I think this is the really positive application of blockchain. I hope that you've come out of this session knowing more and understanding more and seeing all the complications as well. So I'd like you to give a big thanks to Bernardine, to Paul, to Olivier, and to Francesco for enlightening us.